Hello, and yeah, I guess it's on air. So here we are. It's me, Alex Philippidis, Jen, Senior Business Editor.
And I'm Jonathan Grinstein, senior editor at Ben Media Group.
Great. And first day in San Francisco it was both tiring and glad to be back. At least we're in person, which is good after 2 years of these virtual JP Morgan conferences. So, but it gets tiring too at the same time.
Well, this was my first one, and it was pretty amazing to see, like, within several square blocks, just every conversation on every corner and in every little nook is, so eye conversation. So definitely a really fascinating environment to be in.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, the fun part is bumping into names that you've either interviewed on Zoom or you've seen them in Gen or in other publications or news outlets. And you can't believe you're right there next to them. So you strike up a conversation. And that's part of the fun of it. I think even though, yeah, we've seen, yeah, it's the usual fairly cramped hotel, although for what it's worth, just picking up the credentials, the registration credentials to cover this year's event, it took a lot less time, and I went about close to 8 in the morning on the first day. That's a surprise because usually the line's out about the length of the ground floor of the hotel. And I don't know if everybody just picked them up yesterday or just people are going to stagger through the next few days, but that made an impression on me. I wasn't used to being able. I wouldn't have left the hotel at 7 in the morning when I didn't have anywhere to be until 10:30 for my first interview. If I knew, because I was thinking I was going to blow an hour thereabouts.
I don't really have a frame of reference for that, but I did hear from multiple people that they felt like it was just less people around. So maybe the line was just shorter because of that. But
It's tough being in San Francisco because the hotels, if you're in downtown, by now they tend to charge 1,000 or more a night during the JP Morgan days. I mean, what a chip. I use a hotel near the airport because it's actually cheaper to take a bunch of cabs or now Ubers in up and down between downtown and the hotel than it is to stay downtown and walk and spare that expense. Actually, the first couple of years I did JP Morgan, I was in various hotels. I guess the first year it was the Holiday Inn. Then the second year there was this funky hotel, the Phoenix, which you can actually walk to the Westin St. Francis from. And then after that it just got so expensive. And I think expense is a factor for why some folks haven't gone. And you hear that every so often, you do hear some grumbling like that. But there are still a lot of key players in San Francisco this week. And you're lucky to be able to bump into a few and start some.
yeah, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you were able to check out with that pass?
The past basically allowed me into the presentations, and I said the focus, because I'm going to write about it, is Illumina, and they had a flurry of announcements, as is their fashion. In past years, they used JP Morgan. I'll never forget, in the first year I went, 2014, I went with John Sterling, and that was the year Illumina announced that they had broken the $1,000 genome barrier. It was such a flurry of news for that little development then. So they have a habit of using JP Morgan to announce different things, whether it's financial or projects or They're like, this year, what they announced was something a little different. They're partnering with Decode Genetics, that's a subsidiary of Amgen, and Nashville Biosciences, which is part of Vanderbilt University Medical Center. And they're all going to get together to whole genome sequence the largest data set of genomes from African Americans, about 35,000 DNA samples.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah, yeah. And Illumina hammered the point that this will help, they hope, reduce the knowledge gap in that so many of the genomes that we see sequenced are from Northern Europeans or other white Europeans, and that reflects that the science, pioneered in Iceland. Decode genetics is out of Iceland, and so
Or in
yeah,
genomics equity and whatnot, and it really is unbalanced, and only certain people can really benefit from it. There's but yeah, it's a fun piece. I'll shoot it your way.
oh sure, that would be helpful. So I mean that's one item. During the presentation itself, Francis D'Souza, the CEO of Illumina, made what are now annual sorts of round the results for the previous year, and how the fourth quarter shake. Now this is interesting. What he did say was Illumina will finish the fourth quarter with a little over $1 billion in revenue, 1.075, which is actually down 10% from what they reported in the fourth quarter a year earlier, fourth quarter 2021, which was 1.193 billion. And however, for the full year, they'll show a 1% growth in revenue with 4.576. But a lot of that, I think, is expense related to what they think is really going to bounce back the numbers or this year, which is the first shipments of the NovaSeq X sequencing system. And for that, they're saying that more than 140 orders have been placed, and about half of the 300 that the company says it expects to ship this year. So that is at least on the bright side. But when the analysts and the investors heard that for the earnings per share for this coming year are only expected to range from $1.25 to $1.50 per share, which that's about half of the projection that a consensus of analysts surveyed by Bloomberg had found. And as a result, you saw that Illumina shares fell 16% and after hours trading today, after they rose up about 3% during the day. So I thought that was kind of noteworthy, and we'll see if overall Illumina's longer term focus really pays off with the NovaSeq being successful. Another thing that D'Souza said that interested me was about 35% of those orders for NovaSeq X were placed by clinical customers, and that's an unexpectedly large share because typically it's academic users or industry users. So I know Illumina has made a big focus on increasing sales in the clinical market, but so I wasn't sure why the company was surprised, but D'Souza said they were, and hey, I mean that's good news for them. He did acknowledge the continuing issue of Grail. That's the the cancer blood test developer that Illumina agreed to buy about 2 years ago now, but they ran into real trouble with the European Commission, which has ordered the company to make Grail independent and to divest itself of Grail. Illumina is appealing that decision, so we'll see this year whether those appeals either prolong or dismissed or whatever the fate is of that. So what's interesting on Grail is that the numbers, D'Souza is expecting a fair number of a lot of growth from Grail. Hold, I'm gonna call up some numbers over here if I can. Based on the gallery cancer test being, um, hold on, let me call that, here we go. Yeah, so um, actually what I'll do is I'll call up the actual from the actual presentation because they had some figures. Yeah, for Grail, Illumina's projecting revenues of between 90 and 110 million dollars, and that's a heck of a lot more than it made only 55 million this year. So big reason is Illumina says it's going to accelerate adoption of the gallery test this year. And we'll see how that goes, and we'll see if Grail can remain in the Illumina family this year. So that was the Illumina roundup pretty much. And as for the rest of my day, it was interviewing both some name companies and some lesser known ones. On the name companies, Takeda, because they have placed a big focus on gastroenterology. In fact, Takeda had some news on that announced today, some positive findings on a candidate called fazirsiran, and that came from a phase 2 trial. The drug is for treatment of alpha-1 antitrypsin, or AATD, liver disease. So they reported some positive results in that today. But overall, they've had a fair number of candidates in that topic, and I'll delve into that later in the month for Jen. Also spoke with Will Chu, the CEO of Passage Bio. That's a gene therapy developer out of Philadelphia that's in turnaround mode. He took over in October. Company announced it was cutting back on its pipeline and cutting jobs, and going to run a little bit more focused kind of pipeline on their two further along candidates, one for GM1 and the other for frontotemporal dementia. So I'll have something on that, I'm sure. And there you go. How's your day?
Yeah, my day was good. I met with a few CEOs from some smaller, quite large named biotech. So I met with Matt Angel, CEO of Eterna, James MacArthur, President and CEO of a company called PepGen, and Chris Varma, who's the CEO and co-founder, I believe, Frontier. He's a George Church alum. But yeah, it was really cool to see these smaller companies that they've developed some great technologies, but they're not settling for their platforms being the business model to. So like Eterna LNP based delivery system for mRNA, and they're also nuclease. So they're trying to carve out a niche in gene and cell therapy, kind of create a place where they're find that only kind of delve into, if you will. And then PepGen is based off of some work where they developed a cell penetrating peptide, which allows, they're seeing great delivery of hard to target tissues. And they actually a couple of years ago pulled in, I think it was like $150 million deal to help them launch their work into Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It put them squarely on the playing field with Sarepta, and they're trying to challenge that. And the last one with Frontiers and Chris Varma, they've developed this neat chemoproteomics covalent chemistry, machine learning kind of like form, and to go after undruggable targets. So, they're all kind of bold approaches, um, but kind of across the board, there was sentiment of not of the market being not at its peak, and so definitely trying to come to JPM to create some new partnerships and whatnot, and to get the name out on what they're doing. That was like the main base for me today. I flew in today, so like I got a later start to the day.
Okay, no problem. I flew in Sunday, actually a very smooth flight considering it's a trip to San Francisco on JP Morgan weekend. Some years, oh boy, it's a miracle I get here on a Sunday before, but this year went very well. Settled into a hotel where I am, and was able. Only thing was the weather was very rainy this morning, and so I had an issue with cab. I usually get a cab from the hotel into downtown, but instead I finally, after a few years, finally signed up for Uber. So there you go.
But I thought was, again, being a newcomer to JPM, my flight, I felt like every other row was a conversation about someone heading to JPM. So, I come from San
Mhm.
Diego. How this huge community coming together from all over the states, or even
So you may recognize the name who I ran into today, Joe Panetta, the head of Biocom, which is based in San Diego. They were for years a regional San Diego-based biotech industry group. They've expanded to statewide in the last, I'd say, roughly 5 years. And I'll be chatting with him on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to that conversation because I've uh, spoken to him over going back, 15 years, since 2007, when I was elsewhere before joining GEM. And last saw him in person in San Francisco at the last in-person JP Morgan in 2020. And so I welcome the chance to catch up.
that sounds great. Yeah, some exciting stuff to come in the next few days.
Oh, for sure. I'm looking forward. Tomorrow, I'm chatting with folks from Sofinova Partners and Andreessen Horowitz, so money pokes, as well as some company biotechs. On the company front, I would say, oh, hold on, I'll give you, folks from Bayer Oncology. I know Bayer has stepped up efforts in recent years to build a pipeline and a portfolio of drugs in cancer. And so I'll get a little bit of insight in that. Now, last year I spoke with Marion DeBacker from their business development side. So this year, learning more on the oncology development side. So I look forward to that conversation, as well as uh, a few-year-old startup. I can't say they're really new, but VorBio, and I'll be chatting with him, and then Wednesday a whole flurry of people.
Hmm. Yeah, so I without my without a JPM pass, there's some other stuff going on, and I think I'm going to drop by the global forum.
Okay.
And there's a great lineup there of some talks that I'm going to drop in on, and then I'm meeting with some people from Khosla Ventures,
Yeah.
and getting an idea about the perspective of things from the VC front. So I'm really excited about that conversation to shake things up a little bit and see how people who with the big bucks, if you will, are what they're looking for and their strategies in investing in this biotech world. Now it's like every other day I feel like I see something that's like from sci-fi. It's just amazing the stuff that people.
Yeah, yeah, and it's amazing how much of that actually translates into reality. I mean, this is part of, I like to say, Jen, is my grad school education, even though I went to grad school, but this is my grad school science ed, which I never had beyond college. So, and if anything, it's probably far more relevant because we're seeing real life, everyday life sci, whether it's drugs or technologies or diagnostics, some really interesting stuff happening.
Yeah, I mean, that for me really touches on, I mean, the conversation I was having with James MacArthur from EPCHA. He's talking about, you know, being able to treat, or going from like not being able to walking, like really reimagining their lives and whatnot. So it's just, it's so cool to the potential impact of this stuff. So really glad to be here, and excited to see what the next few days brings.
Sounds good. All righty. Hope to see you around.
Yeah, take care, Alex.
Hey, bye bye.